Well, let me be totally candid. I just said to Herman Cain, I'm stealing as much of that as I can, but not this evening. Herman and I go back a long way. I think everybody in Georgia is proud of him. He's a remarkable person, and I first worked with him when we did a tax reform commission that he chaired brilliantly when I was Speaker. So it's great to be back. It's good to be with Ralph Reed, who I remember from his college Republican days, which tells you a little bit about me. And like Herman, I'm a grandfather and come at this maybe with a little bit more wisdom than I had a while back. But I want to start by saying that, Steve, you and the Iowa Faith and Freedom Coalition have done a great job tonight. This is a good time to start a dialogue about America's future. And I do believe that we have an extraordinarily fundamental choice to make about the very future of this country. I believe in some ways this election and the conversation around this election may be as central to our future as the conversations in the 1850s that led to the election of Lincoln in 1860. I think that we are at a crossroads that we cannot hide from. In my mind, it really began a little bit later than Herman when he was describing his grandchild. I have two grandchildren, Maggie, who's 11, and Robert, who's 9. And I do think that one of the central issues of our dialogue over the next few years is what kind of a country do we want to leave to our children and our grandchildren. But for me, the real turning point was when the Ninth Circuit Court decided in 2002 that it was unconstitutional to say one nation under God as part of the Pledge of Allegiance in a school. And I decided, and in some ways I think it was very parallel to Lincoln responding to the Dred Scott decision about slavery. I decided that if we now have judges so fundamentally out of touch with America that they have no clue what this country was based on, we need a political change so deep and so profound that nothing we have seen in our lifetime is comparable to the level of depth we have to go to get this country back on the right track. Let me be very clear about this. Since 1952, we have won 9 presidential elections for Republicans, and Democrats won 6. But despite the fact that Republicans were in the White House for 50% more time than Democrats, we did not, at a fundamental level, change the power of the left. We didn't change the bureaucracies. We didn't change the biases of the judiciary. And over that period, they have all gotten worse, moved further to the left, and become more alienated from the American system. Now, that requires a fundamental conversation that begins, I believe, with American exceptionalism and a very simple question. Do you believe that this country, because of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, is a fundamentally exceptional system for human liberty, or do you believe we are a normal country like every place else in the world? Now, it's a very profound question. When Clist and I made a movie about Pope John Paul II and the liberation of Poland, and the impact his 9-day trip had in 1979. We called it 9 Days That Changed the World. We discovered that one of the great weapons intellectually that the Poles had was a sign that Solidarity put out, which I have a copy of, the original sign in my office. They printed thousands of these. And it said, for Poland to remain Poland, 2 + 2 must always equal 4. And this may not seem like much to you, but this may be the most important political governmental slogan of the next 25 years, because it comes down to the question of truth. Lincoln said, if a man can convince you that 2 + 2 equals anything but 4, then you can't possibly win the argument because facts don't matter. Camus wrote in his novel, The Plague, there are times when a man can be killed for saying 2 + 2 equals 4 because the authorities can't stand the truth. Our Declaration of Independence begins. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It doesn't begin, we hold this ideology, this philosophy, this theory. We hold these truths. So what are the truths? That we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, why does that matter? Because it means the power comes from God to each one of you personally. You are personally sovereign. You loan power to the government. The government does not loan power to you. And that is the fundamental division between most Americans and the secular socialist people around Obama, and the degree to which they do not understand America, cannot possibly represent America, and cannot lead us to a successful future. And let me just say, morality applies across the board. Morality is as important in economics, where having the right to get a job so you can take care of your family, so you can donate to your voluntary or religious organization, so you can have a sense of dignity and worth is important. Morality matters in economics because balancing the budget is an essentially moral, not economic question about whether or not politicians ought to have to follow the same rules as the rest of us. So there should be no distinction between economic, national security, and social conservatives. We should all base our principles on fundamental questions of morality. You had a great speaker last year in Mike Pence, and I want to say I strongly endorse his cutting out all funding for Planned Parenthood, which has become a major source of abortion in America. Now, how fast could we, in fact, turn the country around if we had a president who shared our values instead of the values of the secular socialist left? Start on the very first day. There's a system called an executive order, which allows the president to interpret the application of the law. Imagine just 4 examples. What if we, on the very first day, we had a president who said, "We are now abolishing, as of this minute, every single czar in the White House and their offices and cutting spending." What if we said, on the very first day, we are reinstating Ronald Reagan's Mexico City policy, and no American tax money will go to any abortion anywhere outside the United States, period. What if we said on the very first day that George W. Bush's implementation of conscience protection will be reinstated, so the government will actively protect those who, as a matter of conscience, refuse to do things that the left wants done? And finally, what if we said on the very first day that the State Department will be instructed as of this date to recognize the right of every sovereign nation to define its own capital, and the United States Embassy will be in the capital of the country that defines it, which would mean that for the first time we would put the capital in Jerusalem, the only country. Think about this. The only country in the world where the United States government refuses to allow the local government to define its capital is Israel, which is a democracy, an ally of ours, and it is profoundly wrong to discriminate against the government of Israel and the people of Israel, and we should stop it on the very first day. Now, I'm not yet a candidate. I'm in the process of exploring, as many of you know, and you can go to newtexplore2012.com, thought I put that plug in. But let me say this is about much more than me. Every person who's going to speak tonight is a friend of mine. We're all going to have to be on the same team after this is over. It's going to take all of us to defeat the left, because we can, and I agree with what Steve Schiffler said, we can't just defeat the left in Washington. We need 40 more House seats in Washington. We need a dozen more U.S. senators. We need to pick up the state Senate here. We need to strengthen the hand that the governor has. We need to, across the board, recognize there are 513,000 elected officials at the state and local level, and only 537 in the federal level. We need, for the first time in 80 years, to replace the governing structure of the left with a governing structure that is center-right, and then we need, from the very first day, to implement decisively the reestablishment of an American exceptionalism that recognizes that power starts with you and eventually goes to Washington when necessary. Power does not start in Washington with a bunch of judges and bureaucrats dictating to you what you do. Thank you, good luck, and God bless you.